We told you last week about the optimistic outlook for world grain over the next decade as demand increases in the developing world. Here's how economist Mike Dwyer from the US Ag Department sees it.
I don't think there's any way I could overstate how important China is to the future of global ag markets. Here you have a population of about 1.3 billion people out of 6 billion on the planet, whose incomes are rising at roughly 10% a year. The middle class is already 100 million households out of the 500 million. By the year 2020, that's going to triple.
And to China, add India, Southeast Asia and South America. One of the key questions for an exporting country like Australia is how to produce more grain to take advantage of growing markets and higher prices. One way is to expand Australian cropping into what's traditionally been grazing country.
The southern tablelands of New South Wales is fine wool country. Angus Gibson's great-great-grandfather took up land around Goulburn in the 1820s. For the next 150 years and more, wool was the mainstay at Taranto. By the time it was Angus Gibson's turn to take control, it was clear things had to change.
For a lot of years, the sheep market was fairly depressed, and we knew that we had to do things a bit differently.
The old shed still stands, but there won't be a new one anytime soon. Times have changed. Here in the heart of fine wool country, fibre is giving way to food. Agriculture in the tablelands is a story of grazing rather than cropping. But that's changing, and in a way which is different again from the main Australian cropping story. It's a high rainfall zone, 650 mil a year here. The day we caught up with Angus Gibson, the clouds were playing catch-up. The Gibsons graze stock and grow crops. What's a bit different is that they graze stock on the crops they'll then take through to harvest. This is canola.
We have a client that is finishing some lambs. We'll have these fellas on here till about the middle of August. They're doing about 300 grams a day, about 2 kilos a week they should put on, and we'll just do this job for the client and then move them from the canola onto the wheat.
So the stock come off the canola and then the canola keeps on going through to harvest?
That's right. We can graze this canola almost to the ground and it'll recover. The idea is to hold it back so it's not damaged by frost too early in this part of the world, and this will run through until we harvest later in the year.
Angus Gibson runs sheep and cattle and is able to rotate them through improved pasture, canola and a dual-purpose wheat. Effective winter grazing means he's selling stock when prices are usually a bit higher, before the market's flooded with animals fattened in spring.
Well, I suppose it gives us a number of exit points. So we've grazed the crop through till August, September, and as I said, if the year drops out on us then we cut out at that point. That's an exit point and we've made some money on the grazing. If we can get it through a little bit further, then we've still got an opportunity to make hay or silage. If the season drops there, well, that's our second exit point. If the season is with us at that point, then we take it through to grain. So it gives us that flexibility to adapt to the conditions as we see them.
At CSIRO's plant industry labs in Canberra, they evaluate wheat from around the world to see what's worth adapting to Australian conditions. These are drought-tolerant varieties from India. And with industry funding through the Grains Research and Development Corporation, they're developing new dual-purpose feed wheat varieties for Australia's high rainfall zones.
In New Zealand, we have a breeding program where they breed it with Australian wheat, so they marry the Australian characteristics of adaptation to Australia very good grain quality, and they marry it with the advantages of the European material or the New Zealand material of high grain yield, very robust disease resistance.
According to Richard Richards, there's the potential to both extend the cropping zone and increase yields dramatically.
Our average yields in the high rainfall zone are only 2.8 tonnes per hectare. The potential is we can get 5 tonnes per hectare. We can double our grain yields in these zones if we put together the right combinations of genes for disease resistance, for yield, and for tradable grain at the end.
The new dual-purpose varieties for the high rainfall zone have a much longer growing season. Plant in February, harvest in January. You can see the difference out in the trial plots.
So this plot here is a wheat that's come from the wheat belt. Yep. And this one here is one of our dual-purpose wheats that we're breeding in the breeding program.
Big, very obvious difference, isn't it?
There is a huge difference. This is a wheat from the main season wheat belt. This has been adapted to sowing in May, and you can see that the plant, or the reproductive part where the grains are completely dead.
So it's just grown a lot quicker. It's much more advanced.
That's right. Now it means that the growing point from this plant as well, in this tiller, is up here. In these other tillers, here's another dead one.
So if you put stock on this and tried to graze it, they'd eat it off and it wouldn't grow back.
That's right. The stock will come back and eat the whole lot off, and the plant is basically dead.
The new variety specifically bred for grazing is much slower growing.
This is one of our breeding lines, and it's one of the elite lines, and the real separation between this one and the others is the growing point is actually below the ground. So the growing point is below the ground surface.
So putting stock on here, letting them eat this down, taking them off at the critical moment, of course,
yes,
it'll regrow.
It will, that's right. So there are lots of little branches here, lots of tillers, and these will all regrow back again.
You can see it clearly in these grazing field trials. Same dual-purpose variety, the one on the right is grazed, the one on the left untouched. You can see where this has been eaten down by the stock, Hugh, and it's pretty striking to think that you could get the same amount of wheat off this as you could in that plot behind us.
That's right, and that's the magic of this whole system as far as the wheat's concerned, that provided you do the right thing managerially, and the crucial thing is when do you take the sheep off, provided you get them off before the growing point that will be your grain is elevated much above the ground, you're going to get the same amount of grain off here as you will off this ungrazed area behind us.
Along with breeding new varieties, CSIRO's also been doing a lot of work on grazing management, working out the best stocking rates. 1,000 kilos of live weight per hectare is the rule of thumb. Running trials to calculate the trade-off between extended grazing and grain yield.
When you're grazing something like this, you've got 3 decisions to make. When do I start grazing? How many animals do I use? And when do I take them off? And far and away, the most important of those is when do I take them off?
Depending on the season and prices, you might graze longer and take a hit on yield. Flexibility's the point. Stock needs sodium and magnesium supplements for best results, and nitrite toxicity can be a problem if nitrogen fertilisers applied too close to grazing. Canola fulfils the role of break crop.
Canola comes in as a rotation crop really to assist you to control the weeds and diseases that will get into the wheat.
But it can be very successfully grazed following similar principles to wheat and produce excellent yields.
You can start grazing it as soon as it's well anchored. A little less grazing because a lot of this material that you need to leave above the ground, is not accessible to the sheep. But again, the critical thing, get the animals off before this growing point gets too far above the ground that the animals are removing it. If they remove it, it'll delay flowering and may cost you in yield.
Here's a big boy, 6.97, 45.4.
Crop yield is one thing, but depending on the season and the enterprise, the priority might be to fatten stock. And here the results speak for themselves.
I'll sell for 37. Given the wheats that have now been developed by our colleagues in the plant breeding area, we really have the potential to make terrific weight gains in sheep, probably the order of 300 plus grams a day, in cattle 1.5 to 2 kilos a day, because the wheat that we are grazing with these animals is among the best stuff that I've ever encountered in animal nutrition work. It's tremendously high quality material. 32.8.
Thank you.
When Angus Gibson decided to start growing crops, he looked for a partner who knew cropping.
I have a partner that I work in that does all the farming here, and between us I basically do the stock work, he does the farming. We also have a number of advisors that is critical in all of this.
Dual-purpose crops give Angus Gibson options.
Historically we've had fine wool merino sheep and we've had a beef cattle stud, a Devon stud. We really only had 2 or 3 income streams. Now we have registered and traded stock. We have the lambs and the mutton, as well as some of the wool-bearing sheep that we trade. But we also have hay and silage and a number of grains. So it gives us a number of enterprises.
Perform as well as this.
So far, CSIRO's breeding program's focused on feed variety dual-purpose wheats. The next phase is developing new milling varieties suitable for human consumption. In New South Wales alone, it's estimated there are roughly 1 million hectares that can be sown to dual-purpose wheat.
Let's say you get 3 or 4 tonnes per hectare of the new varieties and good management. That's already about 40% of the total grain production in New South Wales. So that's just New South Wales. The other areas we can move this into, in Victoria, there's a lot of interest in Western Australia. We should be able to adapt this more into the main season wheat belts as well, where farmers carry stock.
John Kierkegaard says more and more farmers in southern New South Wales are now grazing their crops.
I think it certainly has the capacity to transform areas where perhaps previously no crops were grown at all. It's also, I think, transforming systems where we didn't realise there was free feed to be had without affecting our crop yields. And from a global food production point of view, here's a way of making more food from the same area of land in the same year.
In a world where food demand is forecast to grow and grow, that's a big opportunity for Australian agriculture.